let's get on with the actual good stuff that we're here for. That's tonight's show. So we have 3 awesome speakers tonight. We got Chris Weber, and actually his sister, I forgot to update this. They're with the Pod and the Pendulum. They're going to talk about urban legends and ghost stories. We've got Man vs. Shark with Earl, and then Don't Say Boo with Danielle. Give it up for the speakers here tonight, guys. It's going to be awesome. Yeah, so let's go ahead and bring Chris and Heather Weber up to stage. So they are the podcast hosts of The Pod and the Pendulum, which, as I kind of already mentioned, right, it kind of talks about ghost stories and stuff, but essentially they mainly focus on dark historical events as well as, kind of sinister figures in history. And they're essentially working to assess the validity of urban legends and ghost stories. So give it up for The Pod and the Pendulum. There we go. Or I'll give you this one and that one,
All right, gonna try not to trip and kill myself here. So how is everybody doing? Oh, good. So we have another co-host who unfortunately couldn't make it tonight. She had to go to Portland to work on a film, but so we have a stand-in. So everybody say hello to Caitlin. Katie, say hi. Awesome. So I'm Christopher Weber.
I'm Heather Weber.
And we are the hosts of a new podcast that's coming out called The Pod and the Pendulum, where we basically dive into dark and strange historical events, urban legends and ghost stories, and really just anything kind of like creepy and morbid. So
we've always been interested in that.
Absolutely.
Collectively. So
yeah, absolutely.
Made sense.
So it's almost Halloween. Let's get a little fun and spooky. So what better way to celebrate than talk about urban legends, ghost stories, and mystic cults? Question mark?
Why not?
Yeah, awesome. Well, let's just dive right in. So we grew up in a small town in Wisconsin called Chilton. And it's a really tiny town.
It's about 4,000 people as of the 2010 census.
Yeah, so when we lived in there, it was like 2,000. 2,000 people.
Yeah.
So one of these small towns about 20 miles away is called St. Nazianz. And for those of you who are versed in your Wisconsin geography, St. Nazianz is nestled right between Lake Michigan and Lake Winnebago. That's for all you Wisconsinites.
It's right in the thumb of that little mitten there.
So St. Nazianz kind of has a reputation in the area as being haunted and also kind of being the birthplace of certain urban legends and ghost stories. As you can kind of see, that it's a very welcoming place.
Doesn't look ominous at all.
I think that's a trip prize on Price is Right. So just to give a little background on St. Nazianz, it was founded by German immigrants in 1854, and about 113 men, women, and children fled Germany, and they were led by one Father Ambrose Oschwald. That was the wrong slide. Don't worry, it's probably going to happen a couple more times, so don't worry about it. So one ghost hunter, again, ghost hunter, wrote this about the town. The U.S. headquarters for a Catholic mystic cult, which was forced to flee Germany in the 19th century because of its secret practices, is a hotbed of pedophilia, closeted homosexual love triangle, suicide, fraud, incest, and even exorcism.
Wow.
Yeah, our illustrious source, Brad X.
I wasn't getting those vibes when we went, but
yeah,
you never know.
The homosexual love triangles did not age well. So this is sort of what the settlement looked like at the very beginning, in about 1854, probably about 1860. So, very small settlement. And again, it was led by one Father Ambrose Oschwald.
Ooh, so dreamy. Look at those
God,
chops.
so sexy. I need a towel dispenser. I'm getting super wet up here. No? That doesn't do it for you? No? All right. So Oswald, he had some very weird beliefs, and so we'll just kind of quickly go over some of the beliefs that he had. Oswald, for one, you could kind of consider him a doomsday preacher. He practiced millenarianism. I didn't fuck it up this time.
You got it.
Awesome. So it's basically the belief that it's the coming of 1,000-year blessedness with the beginning of Christ, with the coming of Christ, and also it's sort of preceded by the highly anticipated apocalypse, because everybody's fucking so stoked for that.
I mean, we've seen at least 8 of them in our lifetimes.
Yeah, I purchased my tickets like 50 years ago.
Well, just keep waiting.
So he also, besides being sort of a doomsday preacher, he was also a faith healer. He thought that natural illnesses could be cured by prayer, of laying of hands, much like you see with Pentecostals. And he also thought exorcisms could cure natural illnesses, which got him into a lot of trouble with the church in Germany because he practiced this quite frequently without the approval of his superiors.
Can't imagine why that would get him in trouble.
And he also subscribed to a belief called animal magnetism. So it's just kind of this idea that a magnetic and spiritual force is present in all of us, and that you can use these forces to kind of heal. You can manipulate and use them to heal. So that's just one kind of weird thing. It's not a very odd belief, but the Catholic Church had kind of shooed that away towards the 18th or 19th century. So he also thought of himself as a prophet. He had prophetic visions, and he thought he could communicate with God in a very literal way. He ended up writing a book of mystical writings, which he called Miscellaneous Mystical Writings.
Very specific.
Yes,
wow.
He was not very creative with the naming. But this book would actually end up being condemned as heretical by the German Catholic Church in Germany and would be banned. And, as far as because he saw the apocalypse coming, and within the book he wrote that the apocalypse, I can talk. He said the apocalypse would come by the end of the 19th century. And he kind of saw this as happening through the evils of industrialization, the rise of the Industrial Revolution, the rise of more capitalistic enterprises, and also more secularist governments sort of being implemented.
You're telling me how he fucking hated trains.
Oh, and he hated trains. These books, he would not shut the fuck up about trains. They say on a dark and stormy night, you can still hear him. Fuck you! So he also had very communistic ideas. He believed that any one person or entity owning land or kind of like keeping money, that was wrong. So he believed all things should be shared in common, and that would be something that would be reflected in the settlement because it was a very communistic settlement. Nobody had their own land, nobody had their own money, everything was put into a general, community, whatever pot, I don't know.
That's good.
So arguably the most haunted place is the Jfk Prep School. It is a sprawling area. It contains a seminary school, a church, cemetery, administrative buildings. So it is quite large, but it was closed in the early 80s and has been abandoned since and gone into into disrepair. I'd send my kids there.
Yeah, for sure.
So we're going to show some pictures actually that we took in 2003 when we actually went ghost hunting there.
On disposable cameras.
Yeah,
just
so it's going to be really
quality.
good quality.
They're real bad.
But the idea here is to kind of give you the feeling of the atmosphere, and as you see, you'll kind of start to see how the creepy atmosphere really starts to bring in like ghost stories and other urban legends. And a lot of small towns have certain things. You have that dilapidated building where people are like, I heard it's haunted, right? So as we go through these, thank you. So as we go through these, just, kind of get the atmosphere that we all experienced and many other, subsequent generations experienced. So yeah, cool.
That's my handiwork.
Bye, Johnny. Have a good day.
Not ours.
I think that's the arts and crafts
Oh, yeah.
room. Yeah, super. Take a chill on those mattresses. So imagine kids just running up and down merrily.
And the floors are really rotted away. You have to be very careful when you're going through because there's just holes everywhere.
Yeah, and there are trash bags in almost all the windows, so like they just blow. like slowly through the window.
Yeah.
It's very cool. And that is actually our other co-host in 2003. Is that a ghost?
Or is it cigarette smoke?
You decide. So hopefully you've kind of got an idea of the creepy atmosphere. So let's not beat around the bush. Let's get to some urban legends. So the first one is sadistic nuns and tombstones.
The legends say that there was a sadistic nun who took great pleasure in torturing her students. She would beat them and do other wicked things to the students. One night she was possessed by an evil spirit and took one of the few of the young students, to a lake on the grounds. She drowned them in that lake before taking her own life. It is said that at night you can hear the shrieking ghosts of the nun and the tortured screams of the children.
So another version of the story is that the ghost of the nun and the ghost of Father Oschwald paraded around the grounds, and that you could see the rise and fall of the cemetery tombstones and the soil up and down with the breathing of the tortured souls of the children.
Truly terrifying.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. So the truth of this, though, is that it kind of comes from Oschwald and the priests and nuns had a reputation as being strict disciplinaries. But it became started to morph into stories of, child abuse and torture and neglect, probably from a bunch of pissed off students.
Just ruler slapping and
Yeah,
wood
it's probably
paddles,
nothing else.
probably,
Yeah, because as we kind of see from primary sources that Oswald was a strict disciplinarian, being a Catholic priest and all, but he wasn't an unkind man. So I always chalk it up as to a bunch of pissed off students.
Definitely.
So next we have the Headless Priest.
Ooh. By the same small lake on the grounds of the school, the legend states that if you're there at night, you might just see the ghostly apparition of Father Oschwald himself atop a white horse. But he has no head!
So this story actually comes from some semblance of truth. It appears that a priest tried to prank the students of the school, and so he donned a white hood, he got atop a white horse, and he started parading around the grounds at night trying to scare the students. So
That's some asshole uncle
yeah,
shit.
that's not, yeah. He's got like a big Bud Light. He's like, I'm Oswald. Hey, kids. So next we have the Satan Room.
On the 4th floor of the dorms, there is a room where the mythos states that Father Oschwald encountered and battled with Satan.
Stop it. Cue the Mortal Kombat music.
After the incident, the room was boarded up to protect the faculty and the students.
So this is a complete bullshit of a story. So Oswald died decades before this part of the school was even erected. So there was no way that he would have ever been able to enter it or battle Satan within it. And you had ghost hunters going in trying to find something like a boarded up room, and they just didn't find anything. So
I can't believe it.
I know they're credible. So sorry, we're poo-pooing on ghost hunters here. So just bear with us. So next, we have Body Bonanza.
After Oschwald's death, the settlement was in dire financial difficulties. The threat of losing their land and settlement weighed heavily on the brothers and the sisters. So the priests and caretakers of Jfk Prep sold their bodies for medical purposes in order to keep the grounds afloat.
So this is a story I heard, and I researched for days and nights trying to find validity, and I found nothing to support any of this.
Again, shocking.
Oh yeah, it's very shocking, yeah. Because, the settlement was in dire straits after the death of Oswald. That is a historical fact. But the brothers of the Salvatorian community came in and kind of took over the settlement and helped replenish it financially. So this was at the end of the 19th century. So they wouldn't have had any need to sell their bodies. Unless they really wanted to. I couldn't find any evidence for that. So, take that as you will, I guess.
We can dream.
But that looks fun. So, it's a possibility. So next, we have a special treat for you guys. We have an actual EVP recording of a ghost. So strap in, y'all. So this is going to be an interaction. It's a little hard to hear. Surprise. But so voice 1, voice 2 are two ghost hunters asking questions to some entity, and then an entity does reply. Compelling.
Wow.
Compelling. Wow. That entity sounds suspiciously like Cookie Monster.
He does, or like a guy in the other room, maybe.
Nothing cookies.
Well, you decide.
Yeah, you decide. So next we have Oswald's death.
That's actually him.
Yeah, that is actually a picture of Oswald on his deathbed. Or, well, before he's buried.
Isn't that nice?
Still sexy.
As Oswald lay dying, some reported hearing poundings on the walls of his room, as well as throughout the residences of the town. The sounds abruptly stopped at the moment of Oswald's death. One man named Anton Stoll was supposedly with Father Oswald when he died, and he reported, "A number of times I observed that he, with closed eyes, when there was no one else in the room but I alone, would extend his hands in blessing, and then with his hand signal someone away. And yet, I saw no one in the room."
So this is probably, it's a pretty big story. And it was actually written in a primary source of the histories of St. Nazianz. Anton Stoll was the right-hand man and main administrator of the town. So he did write that, but unfortunately, he was the only one in the room with Father Oswald at his death. So I will leave that up to you to decide. But there is another part to this. There is also Oswald's burial. So I'm going to refer to a card because this is too long for me to memorize and I am too lazy. So, Oswald died on February 27th, 1873, so just 19 years after they arrived. He was dressed and laid out in St. Gregory Church for a day and a night where people kept a vigil. His body was moved to another chapel for another 3 days and nights. So after a little more parading around, his body was placed in a coffin under the altar of St. Ambrose Church, where his body was displayed like a holy relic because he was a prophet and all. So they opened the coffin to gaze on the corpse of Oswald 62 days after his death, stating that he hadn't decayed in the slightest and he still was in sexy condition. So one man was convinced that Oswald was not in fact dead, but in a trance state, and it took some convincing to get him to accept the death. He just eats his glasses.
He's fine. He's fine.
It was a little My Girl reference if you didn't catch that. So he was finally sealed in his coffin and put into a tomb. And then in 1926, they moved him to a newly constructed mausoleum, but they opened the coffin again to gaze on the body of their prophet, where they say that he retained his shape and he decayed very little, even though the parts of the coffin had rusted or rotted and fallen away.
That's like by far the creepiest part of this whole thing.
Yeah.
It still gives me the heebie-jeebies when I hear it.
Yeah, and I thought of like parading him around is very weird.
Yeah, and like displaying him.
It's like a marionette.
Yeah.
Yeah, gross.
Chilling.
So those are some of our favorite urban legends. There are a few other ghost stories and stuff, but those are kind of like the big, Spark Notes version of it. We do have one more, though. It is the Curse of Oswald.
Now, this is probably the one that you hear about the most when you're, listening to town lore. But here's the story. When Oswald died, people talked about the curse of Oswald. His spirit had become angry with what the association had turned into and those that had wronged the town. They said that one day he would get his revenge. Well, in 2000, St. Nazianz and Nazianz. How do you say it? St. Nazianz and the communities in the surrounding area were hit by a severe storm. It was called a thunderstorm supercell moist microburst.
Ooh, the sexiest of the storms.
I said it right.
I'm going to give you a moist microburst.
It was reported that winds got up to 120 miles per hour. St. Nazianz and Chilton received some of the worst damage. The estimated damage totaled around $122 million. There were no casualties reported, but some say it was the curse of Oswald.
And that is some of the urban legends and ghost stories from St. Nazianz.
Yes.
Katie, what do you think? Awesome. Cool.
Great.
Sweet. Well, thank you very much, Nerd Night. Thank you for everybody for having us.
Thank you for having us.
If you want to listen to our two-part series, our little presentation here is actually kind of a summarization of the first one. So if you want to learn more about it, listen to our second episode on St. Nazianz. It's kind of about the political turmoil in Germany and then their emigration to America, them trying to get the settlement going, which really reads like Candide or optimism from Voltaire. They just could not catch a fucking break. So it is very interesting. So you can check us out on SoundCloud for right now. We're working on our website since we are just slow, and but we will have more. So yeah, definitely check us out. And thank you, Nerd Night, and happy Halloween.
Yeah. All right, guys. It is Q&A time.
Fucking bring it on.
Yeah, let's do it, guys.
Oh,
wait,
God.
Wait, I gotta get my drink, though. Drink. Da-da-da-da-dum. All right, what questions do we got tonight? I'll stand over here by Katie. Good to meet you. Questions? Come on. Was it a boarding school? The place? Yeah, okay. So was the school a boarding school?
So I am assuming those mattresses are from like homeless vagrants and stuff like that, and probably drug addicts. But it did change hands quite a few times. It was a seminary for aspiring priests and nuns, and then it turned into a boys' boarding school, also seminary, and then it was a high school, and then it also became a college at one point. So it switched quite a few times over, I would guess, the 80 years that it was operating.
Right, and there were dormitories, so yeah,
Yep.
definitely evidence of people staying there for sure.
Gotcha. What else? All right, yeah, back on the right.
How did you originally hear of these stories?
How did you originally find out about these stories?
Well, we lived in Chilton, a town about a half an hour or so away from St. Nazianz, so it was just kind of one of those things where the kids would always be like, have you been to St. Nazianz yet? It's just, urban exploring in a small town is like one of the best things you can do. So, of course, with that comes the legends of Oswald and a lot of talk about Satanism with that abandoned property. But yeah, it was just from the kids really around town.
Yeah, and that prompted us to actually go there in 2003 and look at it and explore, which a lot of the pictures that you saw were ones that we took when we were there trying to find something. We didn't.
Yeah, well, maybe we did.
Yeah, that one picture looked pretty good.
Yeah.
All right, what else? Let's do right here in front. Oh, did you have to sneak in?
Yes.
I'm not legally able to say that. Yes. Yes, we did sneak in.
Well, okay, I'm going to follow up on that. Does anybody own it now?
Yeah, it is owned. And so in the last about 20 years, they've really cracked down on trespassers and stuff because it is kind of a hot spot for people to go and check out since it is so spooky in the urban legends. So now you will be arrested and fined heavily.
Well, and also that they've opened a thrift store on the grounds too. I'm not sure which building that they've redone to do a thrift store in, but there is a thrift store on the grounds, and I hear that they're slowly doing it over.
Yeah, they're trying to restore it, trying to bring it back because it is a beautiful grounds. And the buildings are quite amazing. So.
Impressive, yeah.
That's a hoot. All right, right here. Yes.
I hope it wasn't Brad X.
The question was who recorded the EVP.
So it was. There's a couple paranormal sites that people go out there, they ghost hunt, and so you have EVPs and pictures, and like, is it a ghost? I don't know.
Yeah, we don't really have a direct source for who recorded the EVP. It just keeps popping up on all these different like cult of weird type websites. So. Yeah.
So we're charlatans, basically.
All right, let's do one from the very back. Yep, you. Ooh.
So actually, on the next episode, we are doing getting a little more gruesome. We are going to do methods of human sacrifice from around the world. Basically, from what we know archaeologically, the kind of beginnings of history, to more modern times. So it's going to be sort of a anthology of human sacrifice.
Right, yeah. And then superstitions, deformities, monstrous births. We have a lot of different ideas in the works.
Oh, yeah. I got a huge list right now. So
That'll be fun. All right, any more? Any more? Oh, over here on the left, and we'll do that as the last one. Have there been future incidents in the town related to the curse?
Well, I'm sure there has been, because, such a broad term.
I lost my job.
Curse of Oswald.
Fucking Oswald.
But, but that particular...
My wife sucks. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. That particular storm was one that was cited most of the time, but I mean, gosh, if your cow dies, maybe it's the curse of Oswald. That's actually something we should look into to see what other incidents.
Yeah, that was one of the only instances where it was people saying that. But whether jokingly or not, I'm sure it's thrown around quite a bit. So
Yeah.
Whatever to shoo away responsibility or whatever.
Yes.
So.
All right, guys, I think that'll do it. Thanks again. Give it
Thank
up
you
for
so much,
Chris
everybody.
and
Thank you.
Heather.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Hannah.
Check out the Pod and the Pendulum. Oh yeah, and thank you to Katie as well. Thank you. Oh man. Moral of the story: don't piss Oswald off. At least that's what I got out of it. Oh man, that was fun.